Welcome back to Cam Conversations, the podcast where you get to hear tools, strategies, and stories to support your resilience through questions and answers or interviews with people that you want to hear from. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. What is neurofeedback? How do we support nervous system regulation? Neurofeedback is one of the answers that we came across exploring different ways to support individuals with resilience. I'm so excited to have Jennifer Sprague here today to answer all of our questions around neurofeedback. Jennifer is a psychotherapist and a neurotherapist with a clinic in Ontario called Metamorphosis. She has been using neurofeedback in a clinical setting for over 26 years and is joining us to answer all of the questions that I have as a clinician and questions that clients interested in exploring neurofeedback to support nervous system regulation may have as well. Sit back, enjoy, and I hope that you get as much from this conversation as I did. Jennifer, I want to thank you again for joining me today on the podcast. I really wanted to speak with you first because my interest in neurofeedback began with you specifically because I met someone that had been to your clinic and was just raving about the support that they received. And I was actually able to notice in that individual the changes that had happened since beginning at your clinic to when I saw them a couple months later. And this led me to reach out to you. You explained neurofeedback to me, and it's gone to a point where another clinician and myself in Fernie have a machine that we are getting trained on and excited to bring into our clinical practice. And so for everyone that is curious about neurofeedback, what it is, and I actually threw out some questions to our audience and to clients to see what they want to know more about. So before I even go there, because my brain is going so fast around this, I want to begin with, how did you begin? Because you have been at this for quite a while. How did you get into this? What drew you to it?
Well, again, that's kind of a funny story because I am a psychotherapist. I've been in practice since, over 26 years now. And as I kept upgrading my skills, I got involved in somatic psychotherapy. I did a degree in the States in somatic psychology. And at a training I was doing, I ran into another clinician who already had a neurofeedback clinic. And she was...
What is somatic psychotherapy?
Oh, somatic psychotherapy. So it's trauma-informed, working with the body and sensations, even more so than the story of what happened, but what your body is experiencing and what's getting relived in your body when you're being triggered. So it's a very type of focused, almost entering a meditative state while you're doing the therapy between the client and the practitioner. And so I was very, very involved because of my history of studying meditation in being very, very present in sessions and helping my clients learn how to be very, very present and aware and learn how to do dual consciousness so they could feel what was going on while also understanding it, not being lost in the sensations. And there was another practitioner at this training who already had a neurofeedback clinic, and she really was trying to get all the other psychotherapists and training psychotherapists involved, like understanding how neurofeedback could support the psychotherapy we were doing. And I was the only one that lived within a 2-hour drive, and I thought it was interesting, but I was also very anti-computer. I think people should just learn how to meditate, not have a machine do something to them that's going to make them more meditative and present. So I went kind of as I'm going to tell you why you're wrong about what you're telling me.
Yeah.
So I went for the experience. I took up her invitation. I went to her clinic. I had, I think, a half-hour session with what she had. She had multiple different systems, but the one she wanted me to start with was the Neuroptimal, which is the one that I fell in love with.
Mhm.
And so I had a session in the morning. We had lunch. We talked. I know, talked about everything under the sun. Then I had another session, and I drove home. And what I noticed was such a degree of presence on that drive home on a highway that I've driven 1,000 times in my lifetime, how beautiful everything was, how I felt so aware of everything that was going on around me. It was like I knew what the other cars were going to do on the highway before they did it. It was the most incredibly long state of being fully present that I've ever experienced. And I've been meditating since I was 14. So I've been probably over 30 years of meditation practice. I knew what the state of presence felt like. And I was, oh my goodness, this actually is doing what she said it would do. It is organizing my brain to a higher state of, again, basic organization. And I want to feel this more often. And I want to do whatever this is doing at will, whenever I can. And
Okay.
so that was a Saturday. I bought my first system on a Monday.
Oh,
And as you know, the systems aren't inexpensive. We're talking like over 10 grand to have a system of my own and start using it. And then as I used it on myself and felt I was going through perimenopause at the time, insomnia was my biggest. I mean, the hot flashes weren't fun, but the night sweats and the insomnia were making me non-functional. And
mm,
within a few weeks, that was gone, and I felt like my old self, and I felt actually more functional, less procrastination. I wouldn't say I've ever had ADHD, but I definitely know how to get in my own way.
mhm.
And all these little subtle changes were happening, and I started giving my clients, especially ones that I had long term with anxiety, the opportunity to experience this. And if I knew they were meditators, then I would describe it in terms of helping their brain enter into that more organized state that they get into in a good meditation by just very, very, very gentle feedback.
Mm,
Not putting something into your brain, it's giving your brain little alerts when it's doing too much of any frequency. So our brain is making all these different frequencies. And for the sake of keeping things simple, this system basically works between the delta range of slow wave, that 1 to 4 hertz, to about uh, 45 or 50 hertz. I'm not sure the top end right now, but we have 60 hertz electricity in our house. So it screens out the 60 hertz. So even if it goes a little above 60 hertz, it's working with a range between sort of like 1 and 60 hertz.
okay. And
And
it's reading that.
it's reading that with a couple of sensors on top of your head, and that's picking up the way a voice recorder records your voice.
Okay.
It's the voice recorder does not do something to you; it picks up the vibrations coming from your voice.
Okay. So maybe let's circle back to I'll play the skeptic
Yeah,
because when I describe neurofeedback, I meet one of two people. I
yeah,
meet the person that's like, oh, wow, tell me more. I really want to try this. Or I meet the skeptic.
yeah,
And so I'm going to play the skeptic in hopes that there's some skeptics
yes,
listening. Let's first start with, because you're answering some of the questions that my audience has. But let's go right to the beginning for someone that has no idea what we're talking about. What you're describing what it does. Let's first start with what does this look like?
right.
What
Okay,
does neuroptimal look like if you were to go to a clinic and your clinician said, hey, I have neuroptimal. I think it would be beneficial to you. This is what it looks like.
right. So the actual neurofeedback system looks like a little laptop computer. It has headphones and this little external box that's about 4 inches square, 4x2, that has 5 wires coming out of it. The 5 wires are little sensors. 2 go on top of your head. They're actually like doing an EEG. They're reading the electrical activity of your brain. And then there's 3 clips on your ears. The clips on your ears, one is a ground, which is necessary for any kind of electrical signal being processed, and 2 are references, because we are sitting in an office or a home that's full of electricity. So the reference electrodes on the ears allow the computer to subtract all of that electrical noise from what's your brainwave.
Okay, so the ones on your ears are taking a baseline of your environment.
Yes, exactly. And then the program in the computer, the algorithm, is reading what your brain is doing in real time. It's like 256 snapshots a second of your brain activity.
Wow.
Which is pretty seamless when you think about it. That's a lot of information per second. And the way the program works is it detects any outliers. So if we think of a normal, healthy person who's awake, has sort of an average amount of all these different frequencies. And when you are making more of any frequency than fits with that balance, you get a little interruption to the music. So literally the music, where the headphones that you're wearing carry, again, any musical soundtrack you want, but the system comes with a built-in soundtrack. Or you could be watching a movie while you're doing this, and then the soundtrack of the movie, the interruptions would happen within that soundtrack.
It has nothing to do with the visual piece.
The visuals also can carry the training. So you could be, if you're watching a movie through that program, it also freezes, same as the music freezes.
Gotcha.
Sorry, there's somebody walking outside my window. So yes, the stopping and starting, that little interruption, is a signal to your brain to like pay attention, come back to the present moment. It is like if you had a very highly skilled meditation teacher and they notice that you're falling asleep, not meditating, they'll tap you on the shoulder. Or the old guys, the Zen masters, would hit you with a stick, right? They would slap you hard to bring you back to the present moment. Well, these little tiny interruptions, because, and I'm just going to stay simply with the music track, your brain is always predicting what's going to happen next in the next third or fifth of a second. What's going to happen next based on everything that's been happening. With music, we really quickly learn to predict what's going to happen next in any musical pattern. Well, the interruption is upsetting to our system because we were wrong. We didn't predict that interruption. We were predicting the music we thought was going to play. So the interruption is like a little abrupt intrusion, and it brings your brain back to the present moment to pay attention to what just happened. And so if you think of 256 times a second out of how many times you could be corrected in a half an hour, you get a lot of coming back to the present moment. So, and again, if you think just in terms of, so if you're a meditator, you understand coming back to the present moment, being, again, fully aware of what's going on, but not being distracted by your thoughts, just be with what's happening. If we think in terms of brain activity, and maybe there's, again, too much slow wave because you've had a concussion, and you start interrupting that slow wave and interrupting it, and your, again, central nervous system does not like these interruptions to the music. It wants to be able to predict what's coming next. So it starts correcting its own activity, because within a very, very short period of time, it learns that if it changes that balance of brain waves it's producing, it gets fewer interruptions.
Mm.
And so it is a learning, it is a training, and it's not putting anything into you. It's just helping your own brain find a better balance. And
Okay.
as you get to that more balanced state, like all the fast, we always have charts with a fast wave at the top and the slow wave at the bottom and all like everything in between.
Yep.
So I always think if we bring down some of that fast, or if there's too much slow and that comes up and you get into this more balanced state, your function improves.
Okay. And for people listening, when I did a session, it sounded like I was listening to some super zen yoga music through the headphones.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a crackling.
Yes, that's the interruptions, the little stop start.
Yeah. So this is good. So as you're hearing the music, you get this crackling. And I did notice within myself like this feeling of annoyance.
Irritation, yes.
Every time the crackle happened. And my achiever brain instantly went to, how do I, like, can I get with the like, I quickly picked up, the crackle is a sign that I'm not focusing, and how few crackles can I make? That probably made more because I was so distracted by, like, stopping the crackle.
That's right. It's really hard for high achievers and very, very, like, again, intellectual people who solve everything by thinking about it and doing an action, to take their hands off the wheel and let their central nervous system figure it out. All right. And so this is the part of your brain that's getting trained is the part that learned how to walk without falling down when you were 18 months old or 11 months old. You're not figuring it out. Your body is doing it by figuring out where your head has to be held and how you have to move your body to walk and not fall down.
Mm-hmm.
There's part of you that learns how to ride a bicycle and not fall down.
Mm-hmm.
So again, when you're learning to ride a bicycle, the feedback that you're not in balance is you fall down, right? You smack the ground, and then you work really hard to stay upright and avoid that feedback. Well, that's little crackles, the little interruptions in the music is that feedback. Only instead of slapping down on the ground, you're just getting this little irritant that you know shouldn't be there. Yeah. And then when the music plays without the interruption, there is a boost of dopamine because you're doing such a good job.
Well, as I was going to say, are there people that sit down, or have you got to a point where you listen and you're like, oh, that was a crackle-free session?
It's never crackle-free because the algorithm just keeps tightening the parameters and tightening the parameters. But you enter that deeper, more relaxed state more and more quickly, and you literally are not noticing the interruptions. They're not coming as solidly, as often, as kind of with like back to back to back. They're a little more spaced out. They're more just like a little tiny tap, not a big whack across the back.
So if I were to create a visual of this, would I be thinking that this looks somewhat like when I'm thinking measuring brain waves, I get a visual of looking at a graph and seeing synchronous brain waves. Mm-hmm. And if I have, so for me, for example, I have a history of concussions. And so if I were to look at that visual at the start, there wouldn't be that synchronicity across my whole brain. And so it would start measuring, it would notice that and measure on a big scale. Oh, there's these big differences in synchronicity and focus there. And that would look like a difference in the hertz. Is that?
That's kind of mixing two things together. So there could be all different frequencies involved, because with concussions, you could have both a little too much slow wave to be fully alert and attentive, so you have difficulty paying attention, but also they can leave you with excess fast wave as well. So your brain's also in some areas doing some very high frequencies in excess.
Both are true for me.
That's right. And so it's both a busy brain and also a brain that's sometimes having trouble cognitively putting everything together correctly.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole other dimension where things may not be in phase. So in order for information to go across the brain, like from network to network, like from your eyes processing visual information to what that means, going to the central executive network, what do I do with that? Memory networks, what have I done with this before? All those networks have to communicate, and everything has to be in phase. So the little wavelets have to be in the positive together and negative together. So with concussions, that can also get knocked out of synchronization. And so that makes for a lot of struggles, even though your brain is basically healthy. All the neurons are doing their jobs, they're all firing, but they're just a little out of sync, and that makes
And so would it start almost in one area and then work?
It does the whole brain at once. It does everything together.
And that is the difference. That is different than other tools that you may come across in a therapy. Can you explain that? Because you're trained in Beyond Neurooptimal.
Yes. So Neurooptimal is not considered traditional neurofeedback because it's really looking at the brain's activity as a whole. And again, sort of the overall balance that's happening, which I have found incredibly gentle for people. When there's a negative reaction, it's usually because the change happens so quickly for someone, they don't know who they are because something is just gone that's always been there. Like I've had people who've always had all these voices in their head. Just it's like a very busy brain, but like when that just suddenly disappears and it's quiet inside, the person doesn't feel like themselves. It takes a little working through what just happened there for them to be kind of like, oh, so most people don't have 40 people talking to themselves at once. Oh, and they start to like it when it's quiet.
Yeah.
But it's a strange experience when you've never had a quiet brain.
And that's because you can access neurotherapy without going to a clinician.
Psychotherapist, yes.
So you're in Ontario, you're a psychotherapist. BC, we're registered clinical counselors. And then we have psychologists using this. And so I'm hearing that is an important piece of knowing that the person providing this to you has the additional training to help you process the changes that you.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. And again, somebody who comes in, it's just straight up concussion. And other than that, they don't have any trauma. They may not need to talk to me at all. We just kind of monitor their improvements. And again, I do have some other tools as well as the Neurooptimal. We get pretty complex here. But with Neurooptimal, when I didn't have anything else, I saw people come out of post-concussion syndrome that nothing else had helped them, and the medical system basically said, well, this is how you're going to be. They didn't stay there. They improved. And part of the other question about like the hertz, you may get an improvement in sort of like the amplitude of certain brain waves, like the alpha band, which is 8 to 12 hertz, which is that calm, clear, quiet state when you're awake, alert, focused, but not engaged in the outside world. You're just, again, in that very present state, ready to do something, but not your mind's not running in a million different directions. You're just fully present. And we have seen that with people. The increase in alpha amplitude, so that's the hertz size, gives you the capacity to do everything else better.
Yes. And so this connects back.
Organization of the brain. When the organization is better, everything is easier.
Yes, because so I guess I have a few questions.
Yes.
You can tell I'm busy. And so one is, I love this description for concussion. The main group that is asking questions are parents of children. So I want to dive into children and the big behavior. A connection I'm making in hearing you explain this is often in different forms of talk therapies. We're working with people and integrating meditation because we're trying to create that, help them develop that pause between stimulus and action. And then often that's where we bring that meditation piece in, where we help them build that pause. But so often I hear from clients, and myself included, that when I try and do the meditation piece, it is really challenging, really frustrating, feels like there's not a lot happening or that benefit. And this is almost like a meditation, but with a personalized coach that is seeing what you're doing.
I think that's a good way to describe it. I tell people all the time that the type of neurofeedback that we're using is very much like that really good coach that's helping you improve a skill by giving you positive reinforcement. But again, when you don't do it right, they kind of like, they just give you a little frown. They just know you can do better, but it don't hurt you.
Yeah. No,
they don't yell at you. But the feedback
zap anything into your brain.
That's right. There is nothing, right. There is nothing going into you except information, the same as like
auditory information.
Auditory information. And because they provide visual as well. And there are people who are hard of hearing. They can train just with the visual images, whether it's a movie or just the screensaver, is also freezing. Actually too fast, too quickly to catch with your conscious mind. But again, the part of our brain that is always monitoring everything can catch information that's subliminal to our regular senses. So you are getting trained visually as well. And if we have, again, most of our adults are overtired because they're working too much. When they come in, I say, close your eyes, have a nap. Your brain will still train.
But could you do something? I was thinking about this because the soundtrack I was listening to was just this nice music. Could I read a book and still do, or do I have to focus on?
No, it's not your cognitive brain we're training. It's your central nervous system. So you can read a book. I've had people so anxious, they brought in word searches and would do concentrate on a word search the whole time. It's like whatever lets you sit still for half an hour is perfect.
So my busy client, I could say, you can bring your.
I ask them. There are people who always break the rules, but I ask them not to bring in anything that is keeping them really concerned or working. So yeah, if you want to make your shopping list, fine, but not be answering emails where you're under a time crunch and you're staying in that very active, busy, overthinking mind state. We want you to actually be able to like I said, let go, take your hands off the wheel, let your system start to change on its own and adapt.
Okay.
So something casual. Yeah, you could read a book, you can close your eyes, you can practice meditation.
But the reality is probably just using this as a half hour
of quiet time
would be possibly the greatest benefit.
Yeah. And that being said, I had a young lad, again, when I just started out, and that was the only system I had. And he'd watched every movie we had, Harry Potter 1,000 times, autistic. When he started with us, he did not speak or make eye contact within 6 weeks of sessions, like once a week. He was coming in and looking at me in my face and saying hello and telling me about his day at school. And he used to FaceTime with his grandmother in England. So there's a big time difference. And she would just be getting up and he was just at the end of school, and they would chat for half an hour on FaceTime while he was doing the training. Wow. And he made huge progress. Again, one of the most outstanding changes I've seen in an individual, and again, something genetic like autism, it's not like the autism is gone, but the symptoms are softened, so the person becomes more and more functional, and they still are a little bit themselves. But this was a boy, when he started with us at 14, literally did not make eye contact and did not speak. And when we finished up, he had friends. He was hosting pizza nights and movie nights. He was standing up doing comedy routines for his family, and like a different person entirely from where he was when he started. Like at 14, he could not be left alone in the house because he might turn on the stove and start cooking something, then forget he was cooking it and go out, open a door, let the dog out, forget to close the door. He had to have an adult like always around to make sure he didn't do something like a toddler would just like not know to close the door. And he ended up actually going to college and starting working in early childhood education.
Wow. Yeah. And okay, let's build off of that a little bit, because I'm trying to think of the majority of people that reach out to me, and many of whom are parents have children that they're concerned about that big behavior and the challenge that they have de-escalating it, or they're curious if their kid is on the end of the spectrum moving towards autism or ADHD, or they're getting feedback from the school that their child is just a little bit different than quote unquote norm.
And often that emotional lability where they can't manage their behavior at the same level as the other children around them.
I was going to say, what I constantly see on the referral form is needs to work on regulation.
Right. So whenever I hear that, I want to know what brain injury they had.
Okay. And what if the parent says none or none?
Sorry?
Well, and I said often, what if the parent says none that I know of, or you see them racking their brain and they're like,
they don't remember. I ask about birth trauma, if there was any kind of birth trauma or forceps delivery. Forceps delivery is so common in those kids that are like 11, 12, 13 years old and are having those huge meltdowns, anger out of nowhere, unable to manage a shift in like they were doing one thing and now they have to do something else and they can't make that transition. I can see, now that I'm doing QEEGs on people, I can see the marks of the forceps on their brains 12 years later.
Wow. What is the QEEG?
That's that recording of brainwave activity over a period of usually about 10 minutes. So we do a 10-minute recording. It's a QEEG is a quantitative electroencephalography. So we put the sensors, there's a whole bunch of them, 18 usually, on the head, and we're recording all of the brain's activity for 10 minutes with the eyes open, 10 minutes with the eyes closed, and then that gets analyzed and compared to a normative database, again, age, gender, handedness matched databases. That let us see, is this brain behaving like an average brain, or is there something a little out of balance? And that's where I went after having the Neurooptimal and seeing how much, again, simply getting the brain in balance, how much improvement there could be in someone's function, in their ability to have relationships, and their ability to excel at whatever they're doing. Again, the Neurooptimal is used by a lot of peak performers to improve their performance, because things like hand-to-eye coordination, lowering of performance anxiety, just like overall composure can improve so much that a lot of athletes use it, and again, professional singers, musicians, people who are already at a high level and want to get better. It's the perfect tool.
So basically anything that, because all of those things, I think back to like my own athletic career, often I was recommended to do some form of meditation before
Yes.
A game, or even like as a university student to help me prep for an exam, because I would get so
performance anxiety makes you less functional. Yeah.
this would be something that you could. And so what would that look like if you knew a clinic was offering? Would you just want to use it on a regular basis, or is it okay to go and say, hey, I have this thing coming up and I want to use it X amount of times to prep?
I think most people start out with kind of like that shorter, I just want to get through this one event. And again, I've had all kinds of different professionals. I had a gentleman who was a optometrist, and he knew he was very, very anxious. And again, I didn't have QEG. He did, I think, 10 sessions, and I didn't hear from him again. He just wanted to bring his anxiety down. His wife knew, like, she was giving him a hard time because he wasn't doing anything but his anxiety, and he didn't want to take medication. Did 10 sessions, and we didn't hear from him again. I'm like, oh, that's okay, cool. And then he came back to see me about 2 years later. He says, oh, didn't I tell you? Oh, yeah, I completed my master's degree, and I did some research, and I did this other thing, and I've got a couple of clinics now. He said, oh, yeah, I guess I should have come back to tell you how much it helped.
Wow.
Yeah, it just got him out of his head enough that he could just accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. And that's kind of what we see is people who have healthy brains can use it just to get almost out of their own way. And often very high performers have that high anxiety because they are intense people. That's why they are competitive. But they can also kind of get in their own way a little bit, right? And so this just gives you that clarity, so you have the edge, but you also can step back from the edge when you need to stay calm and clear.
Okay. And so for those kids, and I mean, I often see that as a correlating factor in many of the kids that I see having trouble with regulation, is that they care so much about the outcome.
Yeah.
That in itself dysregulates them or prevents them from beginning.
Right. Yeah.
And that could be anything from how I'm going to do on this test or how others are going to perceive me.
Yeah.
And so for kids, give me some examples of what.
Well, I started to say about the that dysregulation because of a little minor head injury, like again, the squeezing of the skull with the forceps is just done what I would call like a slow motion concussion. The little skull, you know how there's all those little pieces. It's very mobile, so they squeeze and pull. And where they squeeze on the brain, the skull dents the tissue. It damages some of that brain tissue. And it's usually in sensory processing areas, like kind of behind the ears. And those children end up very, very sensitive, but it's also impacting their cingulate. So that fight-flight feeling, when they get a little dysregulated, it goes from 0 to 90. It's just like out of control. And it's actually not something they can control through willpower. It is more like it's a brain injury. And so that we can regulate very quickly. And I've seen some little guys who were, again, very, very like sweet, lovely, intelligent young guys who, again, there's the girls as well. It just seems to be that the boys are a little more disruptive, so they get the labels. This one young man I think of all the time. He was about 12 years old. He was he couldn't pass math. He was never even reaching a 50% on any of his math scores. And he would get so dysregulated and so angry. The teachers were like on the family all the time. The mother also knew that he was like, he'd be so sweet 1 second, and then all of a sudden just a switch. And it was like Jekyll and Hyde, and they could never predict. And he would get angry at his brother. And it was just a constant sort of everybody's elevated, waiting for that bomb to go off. And in less than 10 sessions with just the neurooptimal system, less than 10 sessions, that just corrected it. I can't even describe it. His mother said, he is so helpful and kind towards others. I just keep thinking, who is this boy? They'd never seen this side of him before. I mean, they knew he was sweet, but this was like, oh, setting the table, helping his mom, asking if anybody needed anything. And his scores on math went into like 80%, like in the like the 6 or 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So, and again, we were only seeing people once a week at that time. And I asked him, and he didn't think the system was doing anything. He was just complete disbelief that it was any worthwhile at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked him, what happened? How come you're doing so well on your math test now? Your mom tells me you've gone from like failing to getting 80%. Oh, they made the math tests easier.
Wow.
And we've seen that over and over again with children. It's like they feel like themselves, but again, people are just making things easy for me, so it's not hard anymore.
Okay, well, this leads me to a question, and I think because I mean these are great examples. My one question, you can decide how to answer them. Who listening to this would benefit from exploring it? Like who? So who are the potential clients? Neurooptimal, and then what does it look like for timing? Because I hear you saying 10 sessions, and I heard you say we used to do once a week, and I'm curious what you do now. So if you have someone come in, they explain what's going on, you say, hey, we're going to begin incorporating Neurooptimal into a session. How long? How often?
Again, it is very, very individual. Okay. It does depend a lot on their life history, because most of the people that show up here have had some pretty severe trauma of some sort. So either they know they've had a brain injury, or they've had like trauma in their life from life events.
Because you're in a clinic.
Because I'm in a psychotherapy clinic, right? And so this, again, we are getting a lot more referrals for concussions from other practitioners that like know what we do. But with some people, it literally could change your brain in one session. And I have seen that with anxiety, learned anxiety. Like, again, a person who's perfectly healthy, they haven't had trauma, but they have an anxious mom, anxious grandmother. There's been this kind of passing down of anxiety as a way of being. And their brain comes out of that anxious state and it doesn't go back. And it's floored me over and over again. But if there's a more complicated history, so there has been some kind of head trauma at one point. And again, in Canada, if you haven't fallen on the ice a couple of times, I don't believe you're Canadian. It's like a rite of passage here. So head injuries are more common than people realize, and it doesn't have to be a severe head injury to really cause some desynchronization. Okay, you don't have to be knocked out to have your brain get these little areas of desynchronization that makes certain transfer of information more challenging for your brain. We would, I think, again, within the field of practitioners that I've talked to and met and myself and interviewed before I bought a system, I talked to a lot of people who their clinics said they were using this. It's around, if you just take all comers, the average number of sessions is somewhere between 30 and 40. If you're coming in once a week and you do have kind of like, again, a more complex history. So that is like, some people are done in 10. Like that's with some children, 10's all they need. And their brain starts to regulate like it should. They're very plastic. They continue to improve even after you stop sessions, because now the brain has a new pattern to follow and it just kind of keeps improving. And then other people, because there's, again, a bit of a genetic factor, like, and it could be some ADHD seems to have a genetic factor, autism seems to have a genetic factor. That's going to be a longer term project. It might be 6 months or a couple of years. Head injuries. Again, I was going to say there's one little guy that we had, and you say, like, how do I find out if they've had a head injury? Because they don't know. I ask mom. No, he's never had a concussion. We've never been to the hospital. And I go, so this little active guy that's bouncing off the walls in my office, he never fell down the stairs once. Oh, yeah. When he was 18 months old, there was a time that he was coming down the stairs and he lost his balance and he sort of somersaulted down and cracked his head on the drywall at the bottom of the stairs. And he had this great big egg. In fact, we were just laughing. The dent is still in the drywall. We were just talking about that the other day. I went, and he got up and kept playing, right? Yeah. He also got a concussion.
But that's interesting you bring this up, because I recently just went to a concussion talk, and the person running it was saying, it was a concussion physio, and they were saying, like, it can be as simple as those bumps where you just shake your head.
Shake it off. Yeah.
Anytime you want to shake your head after the fact.
And again, I've gone everything from that. And again, he responded really, really well. It wasn't a life-altering concussion, but it did make him have difficulty, again, with some of the basic learning skills that he needed and his emotional regulation. There was a little bit of a desynchronization. And then I've had veterans who've been in Afghanistan who've been blown up in their armored vehicles. And because they're the only one walked away, still alive, no medic said to me, oh, by the way, you've had a concussion. You're just like, they check you out and they put you back into the field. And I said, like, oh, I said, your health history says you were blown up 4 times. You don't think you've had a concussion. Well, nobody ever told me I had a concussion. It's like, I'm telling you, you've had multiple concussions. And those guys are going to be our long term. I mean, we start with people who can't speak and can't drive, and they get function back.
Wow.
So and that's even really, like, the one woman I'm thinking of was 28 years since her, like, catastrophic car accident. She hadn't worked. She couldn't drive when she started coming to see me. She had everything written down that she wanted to ask me about, and then she would write down everything I told her, because she said, I'll walk out of here and I won't even know if I've seen you. She went back to university.
Wow. So we're looking at, so the person listening to this that's thinking, ooh, this might be something that I want for myself or for my kiddos, is looking at sitting down with their therapist, describing the symptoms that they are finding challenging or getting in the way of them living like fully. We're setting a goal, creating measurement on what those maybe are measurement goals on how we're going to move to this less or whatever it is to that goal. And then we're committing to a number of sessions, likely once a week.
Yeah. And what we've learned because this became a tool that psychologists and psychotherapists have used, who always have that model of seeing the client once a week. Well, what we've learned is it's more like physio. And if you can do it multiple times a week, you get results sooner and they get stabilized sooner. And so
you do meditation daily versus meditation once a week.
Right. Yeah, because your brain, it's like learning any new skill is more like practicing piano. So if you don't practice except the day you go to your lesson and you have that lesson for half an hour, you don't improve very much or very fast.
And is there a max number? Sorry? Is there a maximum number you'd want to do in a week?
Most clinics that do intensives, it's twice a day, usually for 2 weeks. And then the person goes back to their life, sees how things are holding, and then again, when they need to, they come back. And it might not be 2 weeks the next time. They might do 4 or 5 days. But it's kind of, once the brain starts to behave in that healthier way, it wants to hold it. The reason it holds it is because it's more efficient. If your brain's not wasting energy, and you remember the brain is the highest energy use organ in the body, if it's using less energy, being more efficient, doing a better job at life, it wants to hold that state. That's actually what do you call it? An advantage to be in that healthier state. But getting out of an old stuck state takes energy. So it's sort of like getting up over the hump. And then once you're up there, you can coast along. But it's getting up out of that, whatever the, again, dysregulated state, but your brain has stabilized in it for various reasons. Again, whether it was injury or a genetic pattern that you were given. When that's stabilized, your brain doesn't know how to change it. It's
so
just
in saying that, I'm just thinking, for example, when we talk about pairing talk therapy and concussion treatment in other modalities, sometimes we notice that a symptom of these lifelong concussions is this sort of depressive state because we're using so much energy in managing these concussions. And sometimes in treatment, just like any physio treatment, it can feel, because it takes so much energy to do the treatment piece, that your symptoms, if we're looking at sort of that depressive, low energy, feeling down, sometimes increase for a little bit until we get to that regular. And you might, and what I'm hearing you say is you might have those same sort of feelings and when you begin this process, which is where the value of pairing it with a therapist would be beneficial.
Yes, I think what we are recommending now is as many sessions for the neurofeedback as people can manage. So if that's 3 times a week 2 times a week is better than once. 3 times is better than 2. I have never really, again, unless people come from out of town, from another city and stay locally in a hotel or whatever, Airbnb, and then come in every day for a week. Most people don't do that, but that's an option. That gets you out of that stuck place more quickly and the brain sort of reorganizing. What we like to do is one day with the combination of the psychotherapy and neurofeedback, and then another day just the neurofeedback. So if they can get in twice a week, the changes are, again, if people have feel the effects, feel the improvements, and it just makes everything easier and they can stay committed to get through. And I was going to say, we usually say, like, you've got to do 10 sessions usually before you notice any changes, unless you're a very young child, in which case you're probably different after one session. But older brains have been in their patterns longer, so that's more work to change them.
But you were saying because you had an experience of...
I think because I was a meditator and I was able to let go and just let the system work. That's not what most people have as an experience. But I have had people who just had just as profound of an effect. Again, a couple of them were also very experienced meditators. So that kind of a bonus. But I was going to say, we say you're going to probably take 10 sessions to get some change happening. Then the next 10 is going to kind of deepen that and start to stabilize it. And then the next 10 is kind of like the long-term integration. And we're going to space those sessions out further and see if there's any change in your function as we go out more than 1 week. Could go every 2 weeks and then every 3 weeks. And again, usually people notice if they lose something. You don't really notice. You keep getting better. There's a point at which you can't notice you're actually getting that much better. It's too subtle. But if you all of a sudden, your anxiety comes back, you go like, oh, there it is again. You know that you changed, you flipped back to the old pattern. And so we've gone too far between the sessions. All right. Does that make sense? Yes. And again, with working with people with concussions, it's going to take a couple of years before they really have stabilized the improvements. And then again, this one guy I've been working with probably now over 5 years, but the last 3, he just comes in when he discovers his word finding is gone, or one of his big symptoms was he couldn't figure out what was important, like where to start on something, whether it was making a sandwich or doing yard work. He could just literally sit for hours struggling with the decision. Where do I start? What do I do first? Do I butter the bread or do I take the ham out of the fridge? Like he couldn't make a discernment what was important, where to start. So he was just locked and get angrier and angrier and angrier with himself for not being able to do it. And when he was getting better, he'd go like, oh, I just discovered I'm just out there, I'm cutting the grass and I'm using the weed whipper and I just got the whole yard done. So now he's got little things he checks. Like if he starts to struggle with a decision, he makes an appointment. Or if he's losing his ability to speak in coherent sentences. And so if he starts to stammer and loses train of thought, go see Jennifer.
Wow.
And he was coming weekly for, I'd say 18 months. And then we started going bi-weekly. And then it was once every 3 months. And now I see him like once a year. He just comes in to let me know how much better he's doing.
Wow. And that makes me think of many young kids too, that we get that referral for the regulation piece.
Yeah.
And that is often one of, like, we give them their work and it takes so much prompting for them to actually begin the task because they're just by the other things. And so for that parent listening, would this be something?
Yes. Oh, it's fantastic for ADHD. And there's a lot of clinics that work just specifically with children, some with actual learning disorders and others that are just tutoring clinics just to, help the child raise their test scores. And they'll just have them hooked up with Neuroptimal while they do their homework after school. And so there's no coaching, there's no teaching of skills. They just get a brain that's operating better.
Yeah. They're just refocus,
flex over and over again. Yeah. Yeah. It's really an amazing tool for ADHD. Right. Very, very clearly. Yeah.
So for the skeptic listening, I didn't do a very good job of being a skeptic because I got so enthralled by what you were saying. Do you think there's anything I forgot to ask that helps you?
Well, I think, again, a lot of people have concerns about being a different person, like making them different. And again, my experience is everyone feels like themselves, but better, like the person they wanted to be, but have been struggling to be. And that's been the most, again, reassuring thing for me to see is that, no, it doesn't change who you are. It lets you be you without all that kind of like struggle and efforting. It's not putting anything into the brain any more than when you listen to music and you start to feel relaxed because it's a familiar or brings back a good memory. It's that it's putting sound into your brain, but it's just your brain's just interpreting it and going, oh, look, if I do it this way, I feel better.
Oh, that actually made me think of one more question that someone asked me verbally. And they said, if I was afraid to put the sensors on my child,
right?
Even if you told me it's just measuring what is coming out, but I'm not comfortable putting that on my child. If my child sat with me and the sensors were on me and they just watched the video with me or listened.
Training mom's brain, then the child's brain will ignore the feedback. It's not about that. It's like you've got 2 dogs and one peed on the carpet and you hit the other one.
Okay.
No,
it doesn't work.
The feedback is absolutely contingent on the person's brain who's got the sensors on. It's not transferable to
so
something else. But again, if you could see how much happier these little kids, and I've had 2-year-olds come in with concussions, and we don't do a brain map on them. We just put them on the neurofeedback they're sitting on mom's lap. Again, if they can manage half an hour, we do half an hour. If they can only manage sitting for 15 minutes, we start with 15 minutes. They watch Finding Nemo or Happy Feet. And then by the second or third, like literally by the third session, they're running into the clinic to jump in the chair because they feel better after a session.
And when you say brain map, that's the QEG.
That's the QEG that after about 10 years with just the neurooptimal, I got more and more curious about what else we could do. So I added some other, like a QEG, which gives us real data on what your brain is doing. And then we have some other more targeted tools using neurostimulation to, again, do more like a physio with the brain rather than just coaching it. Yeah.
And that would be likely for someone that has more of a traumatic, clear background.
Well, because we're not just coaching the brain to do things different, we're actually directly then affecting its behavior. It's usually a faster a changing of the brain circuits. And also the neurooptimal does not necessarily improve the phase locking between different regions. Technical stuff. If there's a really severe disconnection between a couple of regions, it really helps to have a little more directive training.
Okay.
And that's what we do with the neuromodulation equipment. So
so if I'm someone listening, I could just keep talking to you, but I'm just
I know.
If I'm someone listening, when I'm exploring a clinic to use, I can look at the offering. So Neurooptimal is a general system that's reading your output, so your brainwaves, is providing a pretty standardized response to it. There's no one
tweaking the program to do something different. It's dependent. It's a system on its own, and it is responding. It's not general. It's very specific to what your brain is doing every second. Every session you come in is going to be a different session, even though you're going to hear the interruptions. It's all responding.
Sit beside me.
Right. It's responding to you in this second.
Okay.
Even though it seems like the same session over and over again, you're listening to music and so on. It's not the music. I've had people with hyperacusis, and we recorded silence. So they were listening to silence with the occasional interruption. It's not the music. The music's just a carrier. Sit there and listen to.
It's that crack redirect.
But it's the actual interruptions that is the training. And that's, again, your specific brain is creating that, not the system, if that makes sense.
So you can look for a clinic that offers Neurooptimal. You can look for a clinic that also has brain mapping or QEG, or QEG if you want to know your baseline
prior to, yeah.
Or you can look for a clinic, sorry,
I was going to say, and there are so many different neurofeedback systems created by people who have different theories about what helps a brain. And again, a lot of them are like very, very good and very constructive. There are also out there some systems that have taken some shortcuts, and I wouldn't recommend. So people, do your homework. There's the brain is complex, and you don't want to mess it up. And again, I like people to really, again, do their own due diligence, check on like what's the feedback from other people who've been to a clinic and how they've been treated. I did run into a clinic, and they were very well-meaning people, but they never checked the wires on their neurooptimal system, and they were all broken. When I looked at it, the wires weren't doing anything. So they were hooking people up and charging them for sessions, and all the wires were broken. So they weren't really giving sessions.
Okay. So
the equipment's one thing, and then the people you're working with are another whole level.
So find a therapist that you trust.
Yeah.
Optimal is a system that you use at your clinic because so that is a brand that people can look into. And that will also be the system that I'm using at my clinic, and that my colleague will also be using at her clinic. And from there, if you want to dive deeper, then find a clinician like you, and we will link to your clinic in Ontario. And anything else that I'm missing that you think our audience should know?
No, I mean, I could get into the philosophy of brain training really easily, because we're all trying to optimize our brains for the, best life possible. But I would say it's not just for children with ADHD, adults, again, whether it's physical or emotional trauma, aging, we have seen incredible response from some of our older clients who are starting to kind of lose some of their cognitive capacity, kind of regain like very nicely. But it's not that it's going to treat Alzheimer's, but it can keep people sort of in that functional state a little longer, which is nice. Again, I don't think there's anyone who doesn't benefit. It is very, very, it is extremely gentle. Not not to go on about it, but I think it's, if people are curious or they have somebody in their family who's struggling, it's a great place to start and learn more about again the neuroscience. It's again changing very rapidly at the present moment.
Well, thank you so much for this. I also, just thinking aloud, I'm going to attach some of the articles that I have found linking to Neuroptimal to our show notes as well, so people can kind of begin that research piece if this is something that they're interested in. And Jennifer, I think that we're probably going to have you back, because I'm assuming people are going to want to ask more questions after hearing about this.
I know.
Thank you for listening to Camp Conversations today. Just a reminder, if you have questions for us or guests to suggest, you can reach us at info@campmentalhealth.com. If you want to explore our coaching, our workshops, or any other resources or supports that we have for you, you can find all of our information at www.campmentalhealth.com.